I've developed my own power rankings algorithm for the purpose of eliminating the bias of name recognition. All of my rankings are 100% based off of 2020 statistics and nothing else. Here are my power rankings going into Week 8 of the 2020 NFL season. Last week at 32. Still at 32. The New York Jets. Last week at 31. Still at 31. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Last week at 27. This week down to 30. The Houston Texans. Last week at 29. Still at 29. The Minnesota Vikings. Last week at 24. This week down to 28. The Dallas Cowboys. Last week at 25. This week down to 27. The Atlanta Falcons. Last week at 28. This week up to 26. The New York Giants. Last week at 26. This week up to 25. The Cincinnati Bengals. Last week at 22. This week down to 24. The Philadelphia Eagles. Last week at 21. This week down to 23. The Denver Broncos. Last week at 30. This week all the way up to 22. The Washington Football Team. Last week at 19. This week down to 21. The New England Patriots. Last week at 23. This week up to 20. The LA Chargers. Last week at 18. This week down to 19. The Carolina Panthers. Last week at 20. This week up to 18. The Detroit Lions. Last week at 14. This week down to 17. The Las Vegas Raiders. Last week at 11. This week down to 16. The Miami Dolphins. Last week at 16. This week up to 15. The New Orleans Saints. Last week at 9. This week down to 14. The Indianapolis Colts. Last week at 15. This week up to 13. The Cleveland Browns. Last week at 17. This week up to 12. The San Francisco 49ers. Last week at 10. This week down to 11. The Buffalo Bills. Last week at 7. This week down to 10. The Chicago Bears. Last week at 13. This week up to 9. The LA Rams. Last week at 5. This week down to 8. The Seattle Seahawks. Last week at 4. This week down to 7. The Tennessee Titans. Last week at 8. This week up to 6. The Green Bay Packers. Last week at 6. This week up to 5. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last week at 12. This week all the way up to 4. The Arizona Cardinals. Last week at 2. This week down to 3. The Baltimore Ravens. Last week at 3. This week up to 2. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Still the top dog in the NFL for the second consecutive week. The Kansas City Chiefs. The team that my power rankings algorithm is higher on compared to the NFL and ESPN power rankings is the Arizona Cardinals. Both ESPN and NFL have the Cardinals ranked 11th, whereas I have the Cardinals ranked all the way up at 4th. It's interesting to me that ESPN had Seattle ranked as the best team in the NFL last week and still has Seattle as the 3rd best team in the NFL. Yet, Arizona just beat Seattle, and Arizona's all the way down at 11th. Now, you could make the argument that in Arizona's win over Seattle, they had home field advantage and the game was in prime time. And sure, home field advantage usually is a big deal, but in 2020 with the reduced crowds, it really isn't as big of a deal as it usually is. And you would also think that prime time would favor Seattle since they're much more experienced than the young Arizona team. The Cardinals are 2-0 in their division, the best division in football, I might add. The Cardinals are 5-2 against the spread this season. The Cardinals score 29 points per game on offense and allow less than 21 points per game on defense. The Cardinals have the 5th highest point differential in the NFL, behind only the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Buccaneers. And the Cardinals' current 3-game win streak is tied for the best in the NFC right now. Now, the team that my power rankings is lowest on compared to NFL and ESPN power rankings is the New Orleans Saints. NFL ranks New Orleans as the 10th best team, meanwhile ESPN ranks them as the 9th best. But I have the Saints all the way down at 15. The Saints may be on a 3-game win streak and may be 4-2 on the season, but I'm not sold on them at all. And neither are my power rankings. The Saints really haven't had an impressive victory yet this season. You might think that their Week 1 victory over Tampa Bay was impressive, but that's only looking at the game through hindsight. In reality, Tampa Bay was coming to that game with a new quarterback and a bunch of other continuity issues. Meanwhile, the Saints had some of the best continuity in the NFL going into the start of the 2020 season, which was obviously an even bigger X factor this year with no preseason games. Now, the Saints do score 30 points per game on offense, but their defense gives up 29 points per game. And the Saints' current 3-game win streak is against the Lions, the Chargers, and the Panthers. Those 3 teams have a combined 8-11 record. All 3 of those wins were one-possession wins for the Saints, and 2 of those wins were just by a field goal. The Saints play the Bears this week, which should be a very good, evenly matched game. After that, they have to play the Buccaneers. Now, if the Saints win that rematch, I will definitely start to reconsider my position on New Orleans. The team that was the biggest riser in my power rankings this week was the Washington football team. I was a little surprised at first to see Washington spit out as my top NFC East team, but when I dug into it a little bit, I was really less surprised. Washington is 2-1 in divisional games this season, with its one loss coming as more of a coaching error than a playing error. Washington is 0-5 in non-divisional games this year, but all 5 of the teams that they played are ranked 13th or higher in my power rankings currently. Just a funny anecdote about how bad the NFC East is and how good the NFC West is. I currently have Washington as my top NFC East team, and they're ranked 22nd in my power rankings. San Francisco is the worst NFC West team, and they're ranked 12th in my power rankings. Taking my power rankings out of it, the best record in the NFC East is the Eagles at 2-4-1. The worst record in the NFC West is the Niners at 4-3. The biggest faller in my power rankings this week was the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts managed to fall 5 spots during their bye week, which is a little bit like Ice Cube and Friday getting fired during his day off. But the 5 teams that jumped ahead of Indianapolis, pushing the Colts back, were Cleveland, San Francisco, the Rams, Buffalo, and Arizona. Given the good performances from all 5 of those teams in this past week, I don't feel so bad about dropping the Colts this week in my power rankings, especially because the Colts will have a chance to climb back up my power rankings as they have a very, very winnable game against the Lions next week. But if the Colts should lose that game against the Lions, they will continue to plummet in my power rankings and will really lose relevance in the AFC playoff race. The team that I think is most overrated by my power rankings algorithm at this point is the Chicago Bears. Chicago has the 27th best scoring offense in the NFL, averaging just 19.7 points per game. Despite having a 5-2 record, the Bears actually have a negative point differential on the season. Right now, coming off of a loss to the Rams, the Bears are in the toughest stretch of their season. Right now, in consecutive games, the Bears are playing the Rams, the Saints, the Titans, the Vikings, and the Packers. I really wouldn't be surprised if the Bears go 1-4 over that stretch and bring their season total to 6-5. That would be awfully disappointing after starting 5-1. And the team that I think is most underrated compared to my power rankings is the Houston Texans. Houston is 1-6 through 7 games this season, but the Texans have had to play the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Titans, and the Packers. The combined record of those 5 teams is 27-4. So 5 out of 6 of the Texans' losses have been very understandable. The Texans' lone victory this season came in a 30-14 rout over the Jaguars. Luckily for the Texans, they have a bye week this week, and then they get to take on the terrible Jaguars again. The Texans' schedule is certainly a lot easier after their bye week, but it's still not that easy of an NFL schedule. Over the Texans' final 9 games, only 3 teams currently have a losing record. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and click the bell to be notified when my next Power Rankings video comes out. Comment below if you have any ideas on how I can improve the show. Follow me on Twitter @MPTalks to keep up to date with me. Enjoy your football, everyone.